the military-industrial complex and the business of war. The military-industrial complex, often abbreviated as MIC, represents the interdependent relationship between a nation's government, its armed forces, and the industries that produce military equipment and services. This concept was first popularized by US President Dwight D. Eisenhower in his 1961 farewell address, where he warned the nation of the potential dangers that the close partnership between defense contractors, military leaders, and government officials posed to democracy and peace. Eisenhower's words, which still resonate today, foreshadowed an era where war and military buildups would become not just tools of national security, but also powerful business opportunities for a wide array of stakeholders. Although originally focused on the United States, the concept of the MIC has expanded globally, becoming a fixture in many other nations as well. The intertwining of defense, government, and industry has led to unprecedented military spending and the globalization of arms production. This essay aims to delve deeply into the origins, mechanisms, economic implications, and ethical consequences of the military-industrial complex, as well as the future it portends for modern warfare. Origins and evolution of the military-industrial complex. The roots of the military-industrial complex can be traced to the early 20th century, particularly during times of war when governments turned to private industry for the mass production of military equipment. World War I marked one of the earliest examples of this, with European and American industries shifting their focus to wartime production to meet the enormous demand for munitions, aircraft, and vehicles. However, it was World War II that truly solidified the partnership between government and industry, particularly in the United States. During the war, the federal government awarded massive contracts to companies such as Lockheed, General Electric, and General Motors, which converted their peacetime factories into centers of war production. These defense contractors helped build the war machine that would eventually propel the Allies to victory. Once the war ended, however, the US found itself in a new geopolitical landscape dominated by tensions with the Soviet Union. The Cold War transformed the military-industrial complex into a permanent fixture of the American economy. As the US government sought to maintain a strong military presence around the globe to counter Soviet influence, it continued to pour money into defense spending. Unlike previous eras, where military production would ramp down in peacetime, the post-World War II period saw the continuous expansion of the arms industry. With a growing reliance on nuclear weapons, ballistic missiles, and cutting-edge technology, the MIC became deeply embedded in both government policy and the economy. In this era, large corporations like Lockheed Martin, Boeing, and General Dynamics became synonymous with military production. These companies thrived, growing larger and more influential with every new government contract. This dynamic created a situation in which the economic success of these corporations was tied directly to the state of global military affairs, incentivizing a constant state of readiness for war. The business of war, profits over peace. At the core of the military-industrial complex is the uncomfortable reality that war and military interventions, which bring death and destruction, are also highly profitable. Defense contractors, in particular, stand to gain financially from ongoing military conflicts and the continuous demand for military equipment, weapons, and technologies. This demand is not just limited to times of active war. Even in peacetime, the perceived threat of future conflict, whether justified or exaggerated, drives governments to invest heavily in maintaining and modernizing their military capabilities. This perpetual state of preparation for war ensures a steady stream of contracts for defense companies. The war in Afghanistan, for example, became a multi-billion-dollar enterprise for private defense contractors. Since the US invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, the Pentagon's spending reached astronomical levels, totaling more than $14 trillion over 2 decades. Of this sum, between 1/3 and 1/2 went directly to private defense contractors. The top 5 defense companies in the US, Lockheed Martin, Boeing, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, and General Dynamics, benefited immensely from this massive outlay of military funds. Collectively, these firms received more than $2 trillion in Pentagon contracts from 2001 to 2020, cementing their position as key players in the business of war. Lockheed Martin, the largest defense contractor globally, received $75 billion in Pentagon contracts in fiscal year 2020 alone, an amount that surpassed the entire budget of the US Department of State. This staggering figure exemplifies the immense influence these corporations wield over military policy and government decision-making. Defense companies do not just passively receive contracts, they actively shape the policy environment in which those contracts are awarded. The close alignment between corporate profits and military action raises serious concerns about the motives driving national security decisions. The role of lobbying and political influence. Lobbying is one of the key mechanisms through which the military-industrial complex exerts influence over government policy. The defense industry spends vast sums of money on lobbying efforts, ensuring that its interests are well represented in the corridors of power. In the US alone, defense contractors have spent over $2.5 billion on lobbying efforts over the past 2 decades. The scale of this lobbying operation is extraordinary, with more than 700 lobbyists working each year to sway military spending and policy decisions in favor of defense contractors. Lobbyists play a crucial role in shaping the defense budget, advocating for higher military spending and greater allocation of resources towards specific programs and technologies. This lobbying is not confined to one political party or administration. Defense contractors cultivate relationships across the political spectrum, ensuring that their interests are protected regardless of which party controls the government. One of the most controversial aspects of the MIC's influence is the revolving door phenomenon, in which senior military officers and government officials transition into high-paying roles within the defense industry after retiring from public service. This practice creates a situation where former military leaders, who once had responsibility for overseeing defense budgets and procurement, later become executives or consultants for the very companies that receive government contracts. This revolving door has raised ethical concerns about potential conflicts of interest, as it blurs the line between public service and private gain. The economics of war, a self-sustaining cycle. The military-industrial complex thrives on the constant production of weapons and military technologies. This, in turn, creates a self-perpetuating cycle of demand. As countries produce more sophisticated weapon systems, they must justify the continued investment in these systems by expanding their defense budgets or engaging in military actions that require their use. One of the clearest examples of this cycle can be seen in the aftermath of the September 11, 2001 terrorist attacks. In response to the attacks, the US government launched the so-called War on Terror, initiating wars in Afghanistan and Iraq, along with military interventions in several other countries. These conflicts generated an enormous demand for weapons, vehicles, surveillance technologies, and logistical support, all of which were provided by defense contractors. The surge in military spending that followed 9/11 was sustained for nearly 2 decades, even as the US began to wind down its military operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. As one conflict ended, new ones were cited, whether real or exaggerated, to justify the continued expansion of the defense budget. In recent years, the focus has shifted toward perceived threats from major powers such as China and Russia. These shifting narratives ensure that defense contractors remain integral to the nation's security strategy, even as the nature of global conflict evolves. Privatization of war, the rise of military contractors. A significant development within the military-industrial complex has been the increasing privatization of war. In the 21st century, the US and other nations have increasingly relied on private military contractors to perform tasks that were once the exclusive domain of national armies. This trend became particularly pronounced during the Iraq War, where companies like Blackwater, DynCorp and Halliburton played crucial roles in providing security, logistics and infrastructure support. The privatization of war has raised a host of ethical and legal concerns. Private military contractors often operate with limited oversight, leading to incidents of misconduct and human rights abuses. The most notorious example of this was the Blackwater shooting in Baghdad in 2007, in which private contractors killed 17 Iraqi civilians. Such incidents highlight the dangers of outsourcing military operations to private firms, which are often motivated by profit rather than accountability. Despite these concerns, the role of private contractors in military operations has only grown. By privatizing large parts of the military, The government has not only outsourced risks, but also created a new class of stakeholders in the MIC, companies that profit directly from prolonged military engagements. This trend further entrenches the MIC and complicates efforts to reduce military spending or shift toward non-military solutions to global conflicts. Internationalization of the MIC. The military-industrial complex is not confined to the United States. Many other countries have developed their own versions of this complex, driven by similar political and economic forces. Countries like Russia, China, France, the United Kingdom, and Israel are major exporters of military equipment, competing in a multi-billion-dollar global arms trade. The internationalization of the MIC has led to collaborations and mergers across national borders, as defense firms seek to access new markets and pool resources for the development of advanced technologies. For example, European defense companies often partner with US firms to gain access to the American market, which remains the largest in the world for military spending. These collaborations have made it increasingly difficult to regulate the global arms trade, as complex networks of defense contractors and governments work together to produce and sell weapons across the globe. This globalization of the MIC has also made it more difficult to address the ethical and human rights implications of arms sales. Weapons produced in one country may be sold to another nation with a questionable human rights record, contributing to conflicts in regions such as the Middle East, Africa, and the Middle East. The global arms trade, driven in part by the military-industrial complex, often places profits above humanitarian concerns, allowing weapons to flow into conflict zones where they're used to perpetuate violence and destabilize regions. The arms trade is big business. In 2020 alone, the international arms market was valued at over $400 billion, with the United States accounting for approximately 39% of all global arms exports. Russia, France, Germany, and China round out the top 5 exporters, creating a global arms race that is fueled not only by national security concerns, but by the profits of defense contractors and arms manufacturers. Countries in the Middle East, particularly Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, are among the largest purchasers of military equipment, with US-made weapons playing a significant role in conflicts such as the war in Yemen. Despite international outcry over civilian casualties and humanitarian crises in these regions, arms sales continue largely unchecked, driven by the economic and political interests of the military-industrial complex. Ethical and social consequences, profiting from human suffering. The human cost of the military-industrial complex cannot be overstated. While defense contractors and arms manufacturers profit from military conflicts, the people who bear the brunt of the consequences are often civilians caught in the crossfire. Wars in Iraq, Afghanistan, Syria, Yemen, and other regions have resulted in hundreds of thousands of civilian deaths, widespread displacement, and the destruction of infrastructure. The profit motives that drive the military-industrial complex often lead to decisions that prioritize financial gain over the well-being of people affected by war. The ethical concerns surrounding the military-industrial complex extend beyond the direct consequences of war. The influence of defense contractors on government policy raises questions about the motives behind military interventions. Are wars being fought for genuine national security reasons, or are they being prolonged and expanded to benefit corporate interests? The line between national defense and corporate profit becomes increasingly blurred as the MIC exerts its influence on policymakers and military leaders. Furthermore, the privatization of war and the outsourcing of military operations to private contractors raise additional ethical questions. The lack of accountability and oversight for private military companies has led to numerous incidents of abuse and misconduct, further eroding the distinction between state-sanctioned military action and corporate interests. When war becomes a business, the value of human life often takes a backseat to the pursuit of profit. The future of the military-industrial complex. Looking ahead, the MIC shows no signs of diminishing in power or influence. In fact, as new technologies emerge, such as artificial intelligence, cybersecurity, and unmanned systems, the MIC is poised to expand its reach even further. Defense contractors are rapidly adapting to the changing landscape of warfare, positioning themselves as indispensable players in the development of these new technologies. As military operations become increasingly reliant on cutting-edge technology, the MIC will continue to shape national and international security policies for decades to come. The rise of artificial intelligence in warfare in particular presents a new frontier for the military-industrial complex. The development of autonomous weapon systems, drones, and surveillance technologies opens up new avenues for profit while raising serious ethical and legal concerns. The deployment of AI-driven military technologies, such as drones capable of making decisions without human intervention, poses significant challenges for international law and human rights. The potential for AI to be used in military operations without proper oversight or accountability only reinforces the need for greater scrutiny of the military-industrial complex. Despite these challenges, there is a growing movement to hold the MIC accountable and to push for greater transparency and oversight in defense spending. Activists, academics, and some lawmakers are calling for stricter regulations on lobbying by defense contractors, as well as a re-evaluation of the role of private military companies in modern warfare. Efforts to reduce the influence of the MIC will require not only changes in policy, but also a shift in public perception. The idea that military spending is synonymous with national security must be challenged, and alternative solutions to global conflicts, such as diplomacy, economic development, and conflict resolution, must be given greater priority. Conclusion. The military-industrial complex represents a powerful and enduring force in modern global affairs. What began as a response to the logistical demands of large-scale warfare in the 20th century has evolved into a vast, self-perpetuating system that links government, military, and industry in a network of economic and political interests. The MIC thrives on conflict, profiting from the production of weapons, technologies, and services that are essential to modern warfare. The ethical implications of the MIC are profound. As war becomes a business, the lines between national security and corporate profit become increasingly blurred. The influence of defense contractors on government policy raises questions about the motivations behind military interventions, and the growing role of private military companies further complicates efforts to ensure accountability in warfare. Despite these challenges, the future of the military-industrial complex remains uncertain. As new technologies reshape the nature of warfare, the MIC is likely to adapt and expand its influence. However, there is also a growing movement to challenge the power of the MIC and to push for greater transparency, accountability, and a re-evaluation of defense spending priorities. Whether these efforts will succeed remains to be seen, but the debate over the role of the military-industrial complex in shaping global conflict and security is far from over. The complex dynamics of the military-industrial complex remind us that war, once fought for survival or national defense, is now also fought for profit, with far-reaching consequences for global stability, human rights, and the ethical dimensions of modern governance. Thank you for spending time with us through Spookscope today. Feel free to share your knowledge and wisdom in the comments section, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share it with your friends and family. Until next time, my dear Spooker, stay curious.